Well, good morning. Good to see you all, and happy to be here at the start of the meeting, informal meeting of foreign ministers here in Antalya. I really want to thank our Turkish hosts for making this possible, and we have a lot to discuss today. We have the upcoming summit in The Hague in June, so we will discuss, of course, how to keep ourselves safe, given the fact that Russia is an ongoing threat. We see the build-up military in China. We know the threats from terrorism are very real, so we have to make sure that we spend enough money all over NATO to keep ourselves safe. And not only spend the money, but also making sure that we have all the enablers in place to make sure that we indeed have the defenses we need. We also discuss defense industrial production. We need to produce more all over NATO. And particularly when we look at Russia, they are so successful at this, and we have to beat them when it comes to defense industrial production. And of course Ukraine, making sure that we collectively will do what it takes to make sure that Ukraine can prevail and that we can collectively help Ukraine to bring this war to a lasting and durable peace. So a lot to discuss. Happy to take a few questions, and anyway we'll see each other after the meeting for a longer press conference.
Secretary General, so the US is already asking for 5%. Some countries say that this should be reached by 2030. How realistic is this timeline when a few of the allies can even reach 2% by the Hague summit?
Well, I'm not going to go into numbers now, but your question is right, of course, that the debate will be very much about spending more. The good news is that I assume that before The Hague we will see many countries coming to the 2%. We still had 8 countries not at 2%. It now seems that we'll get very far in bringing the whole of the alliance to the 2%. That will build, so to say, the launching platform for the summit. But then, of course, we need to do much and much more. And that's exactly what we will focus on today. Yes, but when it comes to I saw some rumors on this, but we have no announcements to make yet about partners who will be invited, like the EU or the IP4 or Ukraine, etc. So no announcements yet at the moment. The summit is still about 5-6 weeks away from now, but of course, in due course, we will make all the announcements. A bit louder.
Yes, good morning. Please explain why 3.5% plus 1.5%.
Well, we are discussing about clear numbers here, but I'm not going to confirm any numbers which are being rumored now. So totally fine, you do this, but I cannot do that because we are still discussing, so you will hear no numbers from me. But it is true that when it comes to the core defense spending, we need to do much, much more. One, because we need all the capabilities in place in time to be able, as we know, the Russians will, between 3 to 5 years from now, have reconstituted themselves. This is what we are hearing all over NATO. So we have to be ready for that. There's also a clear demand from our biggest ally to make sure that we equalize in terms of spending with what the US is doing and what the Europeans and Canada are doing. And next to the Russian threat, there is of course the Chinese build-up. We have terrorism. So taking care of all of this, we have to spend more, and we have to think about what we can do to make sure that we have all the defense-related expenditures in place. For example, to make sure that bridges, yes, are there for you and me to drive our cars, but also, if necessary, to make sure that the bridge will hold a tank. So all these expenditures have to be taken into account. Sir.
Mr. Secretary General, Putin refuses to come to Istanbul. Do you think Putin really wants to negotiate?
Well, clearly, Ukraine is ready. Ukraine is ready to commit to a ceasefire and immediate negotiations. That's absolutely clear. The ball is now clearly in Russia's court. They have to explain what they are doing, why they are here or not, and with what team or whatever. But let's make sure that we all understand that the ball is in their court. Ukraine is wanting to start the negotiations as soon as possible, and as I said before, it is thanks to the Americans and President Trump that the deadlock has been broken. It's now up to the Russians to make sure they take the next steps necessary.
So, assess Turkey's role in the Russia-Ukraine negotiations, and what should we expect from these negotiations?
Well, Turkey plays a big role here because Turkey has good relations with all relevant partners and is seen as a serious venue, and also, let's say, you have the convening power, you have the people with your foreign minister, your president, to help to bring these talks to a good end. So Turkey is important here. But obviously, that can only happen if the Russians show up with a relevant delegation. So we have to see what happens over the next coming days. I'm still cautiously optimistic that if also the Russians are willing to play ball, and not only the Ukrainians are doing this, they're doing it, but also the Russians, that you could get to some breakthroughs over the next couple of weeks. I'm still cautiously optimistic.
Secretary General, what do you think of Germany continuing to withhold their delivery of Eurofighters to Turkey following the arrest of Imamoglu? Is this the right way to deal with the partner and the alliance, and to link defense policy issues to principles such as rule of law?
Generally speaking, we as NATO encourage allies not to have restrictions on arms sales between allies. When it comes to the Eurofighter, you probably have heard Chancellor Merz after my meeting in NATO headquarters last week. So he clearly was making remarks hinting at decisions to be taken. I don't want to say more about this. But generally, again, for NATO, we encourage allies not to have these restrictions. So one or two final questions, because then I think other ministers want to enjoy your company. Please.
How concerned are you about the investigation of the Belgian authorities for corruption?
Yes, well, the NATO Procurement Office in Luxembourg initiated these investigations, is working very closely with all the relevant authorities. And obviously we will continue doing that. We want to get to the root of this. We do not accept as NATO any form of whatever violence of judicial principles at all. But obviously I cannot say more about this because it is now with the judicial authority, so I should say only this. But we are fully cooperating, we initiated it, and we'll take the next steps collectively. Final question. Bit louder. NATO really encourages all allies to have no barriers between us, and when it comes, for example, to the defense industrial base, Turkey has a very impressive defense industrial base. It's already closely working in conjunction with companies all over Europe and in the United States and Canada. And I think when the EU is drawing up budgets and plans, that's very positive. We need that. But let's hope and make sure that collectively it's really about the whole of the alliance making sure that we can protect ourselves. And there is so much more money floating around the next 10 years when it comes to defense industrial production because of the extra expenditures. That when it comes to the defense dividend, all countries can have their positive outcomes from this. But then let's have no barriers. Final question from this side and then I go. Yes. Well, let's take this step by step. It is clear that Russia is sending only a lower level delegation now to Turkey, to these peace talks. It is the Ukrainians who have said we are ready to sit down with the Russians, to agree a ceasefire, to immediately go into negotiations about the next steps to bring this terrible war to an end. I'm not going to give any advice to the Americans. Why not? Because it was President Trump who broke the deadlock. I have full confidence in how he and his team are steering this, so they will think of the next steps and coordinate closely with allies. But clearly the ball is now in Russia's court. I'll see you later. Thank you so much.